Good morning. We want to welcome Jason Shiers to Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. Jason, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, can you tell the audience, listeners, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Um, I well, once we start coming to descriptions, it's like I really struggle. I mean, I've got loads of titles. Let's just say that people kind of think that's interesting, right? So I'm a psychotherapist, certified counselor, certified coach, transformative coach, NLP practitioner. I've got a long list of those things, none of which and I say that because sometimes it means people might listen, and none of which I'm going to use in what I'm going to talk about.
That's great. Yeah. Like, what does that all boil down to when it comes to all those different titles, all those different things that you do? When people ask, like, well, what do you do or what does that all mean? Like, how do you break that down?
Yeah. Uh, I help people free themselves from suffering. That's what I do.
Hmm,
And I did all those qualifications to help free myself from suffering, but they didn't help. So that's why I don't lean on them because they're really in a different paradigm of change. They're all often, most of the time, I should say, not all people practice this way, but they're based on the false assumption that there is a broken person that needs fixing.
hmm.
And that never worked with me, never resonated with me, and it kept me stuck for many years of my own recovery. Again, I use the term recovery lightly and addiction lightly because I don't even I've got to look beyond them for healing. I've got to look beyond the categorizations and the concepts and the theories and the flawed individual to really see what's going on with people and to really help people see what's going on with themselves.
And was it your own experience that helped you shift from, I guess we would say, the traditional paradigm or the long-standing paradigm of it? Was it like how did you get to that point where you noticed you had to shift from what was either mainstream or traditional? How'd you get to that point?
Yeah. That's always an interesting question because you might say, well, you had to go on your journey to find what you found. But in my experience of working with people this way since my own transformation, that hasn't been the case. Everyone's had some journey, right? We've all had some darkness, especially if you found your way to me. But, um, I'd been on that long traditional journey and in 12-step recovery at the same time for a long time. Um, and I just had what I call it the intuition of home. What other people call it is an inner seeking for something. Like I'm always seeking something. And if you've been around recovery circles and things like that, you'll probably know this language and this conversation of like people always want the next thing, the next jacket, the next car, the next house, the next job, next girlfriend, the next weight loss, the next gym session. It's just an endless journey of seeking that never satisfies, doesn't fulfill, it doesn't fill the hole, it doesn't give you internal satisfaction or fulfillment. Um, so I was always curious at what is that seeking, like what is that, like and not what I want, the things that I project it onto, but what is it inside of me? What is it longing? What is it seeking? And eventually it took me on a spiritual journey. And yeah, and I had a realization, an overnight realization, that this is all happening inside of me. It's got to be to do with me. It can't be to do with anything in the world. Nothing outside of me can fix it. Nothing outside of me can fill it. Nothing outside of me can work to make it better. Nothing is ever going to give me that sense of satisfaction that it looks like it will get. When I get this 5 bedroom house, then when I get in there, then I'll be okay. And I had it when I first started getting clean, when I'm 6 months, when I'm 12 months, when I'm 5 years, when I'm 10 years. And each time I reached those milestones, it never ever came up, never happened. It's like, oh, well, still got the internal disappointment,
Mm.
of being alive. So it was really the seeking, I call it the intuition of home because like it is a knowing inside of all of us because all of us have a seeking, like a seeking sense, a longing sense, and I call it the intuition of home because there is a home inside of you, and you can find it, by going inwardly on a journey towards yourself instead of outwardly and a journey towards things, and objects outside of yourself that look like they may be the answer this time.
Which I also think so many people can relate to that. Like you don't need to have an issue with substances or gambling or struggling with mental health. Like anyone, I think, can relate to what you just talked about because it can be different things, whether it's that um different areas of feeling that need or that I must have that. So I think that's a lot of things that a lot of people can relate to. Like
Yeah.
I don't know who wouldn't think that that doesn't apply to them. So how do you work with people on that whole intuition of home approach? How do you work with people
Well,
on bringing it up and even
yeah.
working towards that?
Firstly, it is the human condition, that is the human condition. It's the cosmic joke, if you want. It's every human is afflicted with that condition, on birth into life as a human being in this current world regime that's going on. It's like that we're innocently conditioned. We're taken away from our own intuition. So our own inner knowing, our own inner guidance is tuned out of us in exchange for becoming a societal robot. That's what happens to all people. So yeah, every person can identify with that longing and seeking, and some people have been to the extreme of trying to self-destruct with drugs and alcohol. And others haven't. They've done it more socially acceptably by chasing cars and money. It's like, but it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And working with people is different. It's changing the direction of focus, because people come with a outside problem that they want to fix. I want to stop this. I want to stop that. I want to stop doing this. I want to stop behaving this way. I want to stop watching porn, having sex, drinking alcohol, whatever it is. There's an endless list of things that we project onto as the solution. So the change of direction is to we look inwardly instead of outwardly. Like what's going on inside of me, or when someone comes every time and goes, well, I do this and I do that and I do this, and well, then we can say, who's I? Like, who are you? Like when you're
Mm,
saying I, what does that mean? Well, it's me. They go, well, where are you in there? It's kind of like, is it your arm or your leg, or is it your head, or which part of you? And people will go, well, it's my brain. I say, well, you know, we can go through these investigations to see, and that like often at the end of that investigation, if people are willing to stay in it, you find, well, there's no real me. It's like personality is a concept, character is a concept. There's none of that inside of you as a physical entity, you know. So life is flowing through you as an energy, as an endless flow of energy. But because of our conditioning in the relative world, in the physical form of being a human being, to our body, nervous system, and to our mind, the ego construct that we create in response to an adverse world, then people have made up all sorts of stories and hold on to them, like physically, somatically, and mentally in the psychological. But we're all more than that. We're all more than our psychological makeup and more than our nervous system responses and adaptations. There's a bigger part of us to that. And looking there, like having people be willing to look towards that. Are you willing to turn inwardly? Are you willing to question your own experience of who you are? Like most people that are suffering to some extent are having a pretty shit life. They're creating themselves a shit life, and they will often feel like victims. It's like if other people stopped doing this, if my friend showed up better, if my girlfriend did more of this, if that happened, if my job was better, and so on. So when you're in that relative position of life as a potential victim, that might be a difficult pill to swallow. Most people don't know, accept that they live as a victim, but they do. Even if it's subtly, it's there, and that's the cause of all your suffering. Your internal perception of your outside world, and actually, what's really going on is that you're creating adversity in your everyday life because life just wants you to heal. It wants you to look inwardly and see, what is this saying about me? What is this saying about me? What is this saying about me? Everything is happening that way. Not everything. I caveat this for people who've been abused, raped, been involved in violence and stuff. You know, obviously there's a caveat there. I'm not condoning bad behavior. I'm not saying it that way. What I'm saying is that you can have a great life yourself. You can see beyond all your external circumstances by looking inwardly, and it's like you're changing existential perspective of yourself to like, I'm an okay person and the world is okay, regardless of what's going on, regardless of anything outside of yourself. Then your whole life changes. You know, like everything changes. Your outlook changes. Your relationships change. Everything. So rather than focusing on all these external things around us, you know, it's kind of like we're just changing the way we're seeing it, and that's the biggest impact that we can have.
I think it's amazing the way that you first brought up because I know like when someone goes and seeks some kind of, care, help, service, treatment, and what brings you here today, and you say they talk about the outward things, right? They start talking about what's going on with this external thing. And then we sometimes ask a lot of questions about that without like what you mentioned is bring it back to, well, who are you? Like I really enjoy that. Like when I went to counseling my first time, one of the things I liked about my counselor was, as I was talking about why I was there, one of the things he asked was, what's it like to be you? And to me that actually got me to think more of, oh, now let me sit with myself for a moment versus talking about all these other things that are going on. And I really want to talk to you about the seeking part with this because we look at things like discovery, exploration, adventure. Normally those come with a excitement. However, when it's like, ooh, discovery of the new car or the new thing, but people don't necessarily have that excitement when it comes to exploring discovery of who I am, of internal things.
Yeah,
Can you speak about how we can get people more comfortable with that uncomfortableness with seeking internally
yeah,
versus what tends to be seeking externally?
yeah. It's funny you said that because my girlfriend, we were talking yesterday, and she said, you know, people go and jump off buildings and all sorts of stuff just to feel alive. She said, and we can just feel alive right here, you know. And I said, isn't that crazy? You know, isn't that crazy that the lengths people go to just to feel alive, you know, when you can really just feel alive just sitting in the car, you know? Um, there's some core woundings, you know, at the bottom of the bottom of everything for most people, you know, because of the world how it is, because of the adversity, relational adversity. And by relational adversity, I don't necessarily mean like rape and violence. I just mean perhaps the lack of love or the lack of care, the lack of being seen as a child, you know, any of those things. Um, we create meaning out of, you know, we create meaning. I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. And those things kind of play out through our conditioning, right through everything, you know, and they're very deep. And when you ask somebody to go inwardly, you know, it's like then that's what they're faced with at the core of everything. So it's like facing the fact that I am unlovable. You know, it's
Mm.
terrifying for my body. My system is terrified of that. Most people's systems are terrified of that. So it takes a real safe experience in a therapeutic relationship to be able to go towards yourself to such an extent that you can feel that. And that's the thing. Like the more you go towards yourself, the more sensitive you become, the more alive you become. Like your sensitivity is changing in all ways. Like it's changing your feeling of aliveness and the fact that you're going to feel more and connect more to the world at all times. So as you're going like underneath underneath all the resistance within us, you know, like is all the beauty and all the power as well. So as you go towards yourself, not only do you feel more, you get more sensitive, you get feel more alive, you also gain more power, more authentic voice, more connection, everything, because it's all hidden by the same stuff, the good it's not even called the bad anymore. To me, feeling is not bad. Feeling is beautiful. And many years ago, I would have said, fuck that. I don't want to feel anything.
Right. And not, yeah, like I feel like it's even the things that are difficult. I think one of the best books I read was Pain, the Gift Nobody Wants. And it was Life Without Pain can really hurt you. Because I try to get away from like looking at feelings as like negative,
Mm,
bad, positive, good. Like it's they're telling us things, right? Like they are emotions are feeding us information, but not a let's quick jump to this one and attach to it, or let's not detach from one entirely either. You know, like that's not um the purpose or of how it serves us or helps us. So, but I think it's you make a great point where, you know, we're not really taught at a young age to really focus inward on ourselves. You know, we are so focused or looked at for, you know, the external things and doing
mm,
these things, engaging in this activity, that activity. And I like the way that you said you were talking with your girlfriend about that, like I can feel this way just right now, like where I am. You know, I don't need to go over here across the world on a trip to feel a certain way. I can get some sense of that when I'm just wherever I am.
yeah.
So so that the work that you do, and I want to ask you, your work is called the Infinity Recovery Project, right? That's
Yeah, Infinite Recovery Project. Yeah.
yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. Um, the Infinite Recovery Project is a currently, I mean, it's a book it's available on Amazon, and it is at the moment, there's a live group that runs. It's going to turn into a monthly membership for people who are struggling, where there's regular meetings and teaching courses and community. And also doing training for therapists, professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, in this, what I call a new model, of addiction. But really, I have to call it a model because that's what the world understands. But in my mind, it's not a model. It is really an understanding of yourself. And if you understand yourself, then you can help anyone heal. If you don't understand yourself, no amount of training in concepts, modalities, or theories will help you really relate to someone's inner world. So it's not that you can't help anyone. If we're talking about two different paradigms, where there's a person that's broken and damaged, you can go off and learn a theory and teach them some concepts that might offer them a plaster on a bullet hole solution. When you move over here into the other paradigm and you say, well, actually, who am I? And who's this other person? And who are we? And we look inwardly and we go on that journey. Now, the key to being able to go on that journey as a professional is that you've gone on that journey yourself and you understand it. Not your PhD, not your BACP, not your any letter after your name, because your client's body doesn't give a shit about your qualifications. It cares about the feeling of safety, the feeling of presence in the moment. And to feel safe and to feel present, you have to have gone on your own inner journey, because you are the vessel through which the healing passes. It's not you. You are not solely responsible for your client's healing, but you are there in the present, in the energy of life as it happens with them. You are their safe relational other, because we're wounded in relationship and we heal in relationship, and that's how it has to be.
And there are times where like that balance of part of it, like with discovery, is with others, but also moments of having to do being able to sit with yourself too. Like I think that's always something that I know there's always a lot of talk of like the need for connection. There's no doubt that. I mean, we're social creatures, but
Mm,
also like there are times where I still think time with you is important. You know, I think like that's that difference between like I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. You know,
yeah,
like where I can do things and sit with myself and connect with me. It doesn't mean I do that forever, or that's the only person I do it with. But I think there's also some some need for people to be able to sit and discover, or give themselves safe to discover just with themselves.
Yeah, it's an important point, and I find that it progresses. Like you're at first, I think a relational other, if you've been on a journey of escapism to some extent, like in your life, which most people have, if you drive down the road, every person you see walking will have their face in a mobile phone, right? Today. And it's kind of like they're not even looking where they're going or who's around them, they're just in a screen. So that's an addiction in and of itself, an addiction to escape from self. And even in recovery, 12-step recovery, traditional recovery, and many different types of recovery, people just swap one addiction for another. They put down drugs, pick up sex, relationships, food, gym, and so on. So they're all escaping to some extent. And to actually ask somebody to just sit with themselves is horrifically painful because they've never done that. So starting off with a relational other, then just introducing, I do some bite-sized meditations for people, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Sometimes people can't even do that,
Yeah.
like and they're just little journeys inwardly to check what state you're in. Is there a yes or a no in there to something? It's like just small little somatic investigations into ourselves. And that's challenging for people. But the more we go towards ourselves relationally, the more we understand ourselves, then and of course there's the flip side of this. Some people want to be in solitude because it's an escape, because it's an escape from interaction with people, and they've got their inner world and they're stuck in it. That's not the same thing as we're talking about being able to sit in self with self and just explore our inner world, just be curious about what's going on inside of us. And that does come with practice and time, but I would imagine if you've had a life of escapism, not without a relational other at first, like to guide you there,
And I
or
also,
or an experience, right, or some sort of spiritual experience, or something happening, perhaps even a tragedy. Sometimes things like that wake people up surprisingly.
right. And other times I think the part that people don't understand too is sometimes like that doesn't. People are thinking like this rock bottom or this certain traumatic event will be a change or a catalyst for something that like an aha moment.
Yeah.
But also we don't want to wait for those to happen either. Like we're
No.
talking about being able to tap into this resource in understanding and discovery, yeah, like right now, like being able to do this today,
Yeah.
like not having to wait for something to happen. And I also feel like this is something that is really works across the spectrum, right, of life, because it's
Yeah.
not just like I've got this substance use issue and now I've stopped using and now
Yeah.
I'm good, but this is something more that's like, as we get older, as we continue to go through change with how we are and things in our lives, like this is something that would apply throughout the lifespan,
Yeah.
really. Which I don't think we talk about enough with some of the things that goes on because this is different than someone who's like a young teen, right? Versus someone who's maybe in like later stages of their life. And I think this is something with that home, right? That intuition to home is something that would be very applicable as we go through this life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for all people. It's true for all people. And like I could do a whole podcast episode on the creation of pathology and the what that's about and kind of the uselessness of it. It's kind of like, and maybe it's got some value in some places at times. I'm not saying people don't suffer, but forcing them as a professional to look in that direction to me perpetuates shame and suffering, and sends people further deeper into a journey of separation versus coming back to wholeness, to togetherness. And like you said, it's universally applicable to help people see the source of their suffering is within them, for it's true for all people, for all things.
At what at what how do you describe the point? Because this is a lifelong thing. This is ongoing. This isn't just a one thing, one time, stop this. Like this is a continuous thing. How do you talk with people about like what point? at least what we're trying to get to. You know, like it's not an end destination, but with this whole idea, like the intuition of home, like what are you trying to get people to like this understanding that then unlocks, you know, the potential and the what all this can be. Um,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
describe that to people? Because I think a lot of people in that searching and
Mm.
discovery, they don't always know what it is that they're trying to get to or understand. Like there's some lost
Yeah.
um
But they
in
do
that.
know, though. They do know, and they just don't know that they know because
Mm,
everybody knows, and that's the thing. It's like I'm not teaching them something new, am I? They already know. They just don't know that they know. It's already inside of them. I'm just highlighting what it is. And if you ask people enough questions about their life, you'll under if you know, you'll know how they know when they talk to you about their life because they'll tell you little things like, I don't know. I was just sat by the fireplace and all of a sudden all my problems had gone away, and it's kind of like, and I was just mesmerized by the fire and I was at peace, or I was walking on the beach, or I was hugging a tree, or I was walking my dog and I noticed how much my dog is loyal and so on, So they're just giving you little snippets of their knowing, about presence, about life, about aliveness. And I'm like, if someone's depressed and they share a moment like that with you. Say, well, what happened to your depression in that moment? Because I thought, because usually they've said their depressions all the time, always, and I'm saying, oh, how come your depression disappeared in that moment? And they'll go, do you know what? I never thought about that. Yeah, it's just come and go, it's not just there permanently. And then you've got a little crack, a little crack in their belief of this pathology of what's wrong with them. So then they start to wonder, well, yeah, what is this? And it's like, so they open an investigation. So by being willing to listen to somebody and asking them questions, to genuinely be curious about their life. And you can't manufacture genuine curiosity. Like, I really want to know about their life. It's not like my job or something I need to know. It's like I really do give a shit. I want to know. And people will always tell me. People always tell me about their own intuition of home. People always tell me about their knowing of home. People will always, in their roundabout way, I just recognize it and they don't. So all I'm then doing is highlighting that to them. It's already within. And once people get a sense of that, like intuition is been tuned out of us, like I said earlier. And you can ask people about, have you ever had a relationship where you knew at the start it wasn't right for you, but you still did it anyway? And everyone says yes to that question. I say, well, what in you knew? What was it in you that knew? And they go, you know what? I don't know, but I just didn't listen to that voice inside of me. I just carried on anyway, and it got really destructive and toxic and painful. And so I say, there you go. You knew at the start. You knew something and you knew, you just didn't listen to it. So it's there. The intuition is there. Yet, for some reason, you've been taught, like you said, you've been entered into what I call it is an involuntary rat race, at birth. You've been entered into an involuntary rat race and you don't even know it.
yeah, I really like that the talk as you were just mentioning with intuition because we've been sort of conditioned or we've been giving the messaging that people's intuition has been wrong, right? Because like we
Yeah.
say things like um, you know, someone comes to treatment or they come to counseling and sometimes the messaging is like, well, your best thinking got you here. Like
Yeah.
meaning your way didn't like what do we say? Like your way didn't work.
Yeah.
And the best that you could try, you know, ended up having you here, which then says like you didn't know, you weren't right, your ways were faulty, and then how could someone's intuition not feel like it's damaged or broken? Or if we share these beliefs of like someone is broken or there's something wrong with them, like you said, like there's no doubt the whole idea of my own tuition is going to be something I can't trust or I'm not going to listen to. Or if I share that, they're not gonna want me to go by that, right? Like they're gonna want me to listen to the expert, or they're gonna want me to do what everyone else says to do because my way didn't work. So I think we've moved away from talking exploring and really looking at intuition in general. You don't hear that come up a lot in treatment work, recovery work, count like it's not a word that is very commonly used.
Yeah. And you could call it life, You could call it that the life has been tuned out of you, you know,
Yeah.
because that's the aliveness that I'm talking about at the start. And even I don't want to completely trash like traditional recovery because I think it's got its value and it certainly had its value for me. But even if you think about the first step, of admitting your powerlessness, it's like saying let go of your own intuition. I have to admit that my own internal guidance doesn't work, because it got me here, like you said, it was my best thinking got me here and all those things. Now, even though there is a kind of papering over the cracks in traditional recovery, like giving you some sort of respite from temporary destruction. It's like by temporary, I mean that, yeah, we do put down drugs and alcohol in 12-step recovery, but we pick up every other thing, like food, usually first. Have you ever seen a guy come to the rooms and like he's like 50 kilos, and then within 12 weeks, he's like 110 kilos or something? It's kind of like, it's just the most common thing, almost happens to every guy. We just substitute one addiction for another. It doesn't go away. We never put the fire out, in the first place. We just found a way to paper over the cracks. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. It's got its value, and I certainly will say to people to go to meetings sometimes. But we're just looking in a different direction here, like in a completely different direction to that, trying to fix something that's apparently broken. We're trying to see what's right with you instead of what's wrong with you. That's my words that I use. I said, come and see what's right with you, instead of come and see what's wrong with you, and I'm the expert and I'll help you fix it. It's like we can't meet on this uh position of I'm the expert and you need my help. That will never help anybody. It's like we have to meet on a human to human basis. Like, hey, I see you, and I'm you too. I am like you, and I see you, and I've been on this journey, and maybe I'm a couple of steps ahead, but like I can relate. I can be with you while you go on this journey. And that's completely different to like I'm the expert and I know something and you don't, because straight away the nervous system then feels like, oh yeah, this person isn't safe, so you're never going to feel safety. You're never going to go on a journey with that expert position. I'm the substance use expert, blah blah, psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, therapist, whatever it is.
Yeah, I always look at the expert as is always the expert on you, on them is
Yeah,
always going to be them. Like they will always know themselves better than I ever would and know what's
yeah.
going on. I've always wanted to make sure that the person seeking, care or services is always the expert of them. Like there's no way I'm gonna know more than you about you. Um, but that doesn't always get communicated, in some of the
Well,
circles or some of the relationships, some of the dynamics when you've entered into a helping profession. That can happen. But I think we need to remember that um, that is the expert in the room is that person. They know themselves best.
yeah. And that, again, that's a natural part of that involuntary entry into the rat race. People get clean and they want to become a therapist, doctor, psychiatrist, and stuff, or they just have gone that way to avoid their own suffering. So they become an expert, often to offset their own feeling of unworthiness. That tends to be the journey that people go on. So, like, once they become the expert, then don't have to face their unworthiness. So they stay in relation to everyone else. That's why a lot of professionals are quote unquote useless. They don't help people. They just patch up. They just put a plaster on a bullet hole because all they're really doing with their expert position is avoiding their own unworthiness. So they don't want to go on their own journey to themselves. So instead, they get letters after their name, and then they become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And then when somebody like me or you that's suffering goes to somebody like that and they position themselves as the expert, they tell us what's wrong with us. We just go away making excuses for our behavior and our actions based on what this person told us. Well, I've got substance use disorder. The doctor told me, and that's why I do this. That's the reason for everything. It's a disease, uh, which is an innocent process, but it happens that way.
Yeah. So one more question before we kind of do a final takeaway. Where, if there's someone, listening to our discussion and they're trying to think of how do I just begin to turn this seeking and exploration that's been outward, that's been towards maybe materials or statuses or something like that, and they're trying to think like how do I begin that step of um, looking more inward and in that intuition of home, like where would you encourage people to where that first step or that direction can be?
Right now in this moment, it's like as you're listening to this episode, it's like, is the intuition in you alive? Is there something that we've talked about today that feels interesting? Is there something we've talked about today that your body said yes to? Do you go, yes, that's what that just sounds so true to me, or I've heard that before, but it didn't land the same way, or there's something in there that makes sense to me, right? Straight away, we're doing it right now, live in the moment as it happens. Listen to yourself. Your body will tell you. If you listen to this conversation and you was asleep, doing the cleaning at the same time, driving the car, just not looking out the window, you didn't really hear anything. Cool. It's not this moment for you. It's like, but if you really listened and you thought, you know what, there's really something important here. Trust that, trust that. And it's not about the right direction for the journey. Of course, I'm one of many fingers pointing to the moon, but it's not about finding the right way. It's less about that. It's just about going on the journey. Like the journey is the destination. Being willing to go inwardly is the destination. It's not in 10 years when you earn £1 million or get a big house. It's now, and you can start that right away.
I appreciate that because I think a lot of times it's such a quickness to want to take something and run with it or immediately go to the next thing versus like we need more moments to pause
Yeah.
and to just sit with something before and that but that's part of it, right? Like that's part of the it's not like you're stopping life. It's not that you're just not doing anything, but you need moments to be able to sit and reflect with yourself or do the mindfulness, but just to be, I just did this thing. What is this all? What I feel with this? What did I get with this? What am I sitting with right now after listening to this or doing this versus immediately thinking like, all right, I did that. Now let's what do I go do with it? Like let me go. So I think like part of that journey is being able to sit now and reflect and think and what was it like to be me as I just went through that? And there's no need to just rush to the next thing because that can lead us to the wrong discovery, right? The wrong seeking, the wrong
Yeah.
attempt. So I really, really do appreciate that. And so, final takeaway, we'll have links for listeners to your website to learn more about you and find out more about the Infinite Recovery Project. But what will be your final takeaway or any couple of points you'd want to share with listeners?
It would be just to reiterate that last point, like if you have listened to this, I'm glad we brought this up because even when I work with clients, I never sell any of my services. I don't sell it to, I've got no sell to anybody. It's an invitation by intuition, like after we have a conversation, are you intuitively drawn to have another? Does it feel right? Does it resonate? And it's the same with this audio, with listening to it, with listening to anything in this realm, with any teacher, any a trainer, any therapist, whoever it is, it's like leaning into yourself and saying, does that feel good to me? Does that feel like, does my body open or close? Like just the most basic somatic response of your body, because your body tells you before your mind, it's like, am I leaning in or am I leaning out? That's the most basic somatic. Am I sat open? Am I like thinking, wow, this is interesting? Or am I closed? Am I protecting myself? Are my arms folded and I'm kind of shrinking myself? What's going on inside of me as I listen? So starting to lean into what our intuition does for us. Your body will tell you, it will open or close, it will shrink or it will grow, in relation to going towards or away from life stimulus. And you might get a resonance in the mind. Sometimes, it can become a little bit funny. Like, are we listening to our own thinking or are we listening to intuition? Like if your mind's listening to, uh, if your mind's going, no, fuck this, get away from this, turn it off. Do you know what I mean? It's like perhaps there's something in you that this is true and it's just triggering, it's like it feels like somatically scary, and your body's contracting as a way of protecting you. But all this stuff comes via going on this journey, like to really understand yourself. I've kind of been doing this so long that I'm really in tune with my body and what's happening and how it's relating to the moment, to conversation. So, yeah, sorry, without going on too much, listening to yourself, even right now in this moment, in relation to what you're hearing, or if not, try it somewhere else. Go and have a conversation with someone you love and watch your own body expand. Go and watch your child play, and see what happens in your heart. Feel your heart, let it expand. And go and watch some sort of crappy crime program or real life, TV, what's going on in the news somewhere, and watch your body shrink and contract. It's like, and start to become aware of what's going on in you, because it's such a gift, and it is the key to beauty, to beauty, to sensitivity, to aliveness, like to knowing yourself is the key to that.
It's amazing. I think that's a great uh takeaway for listeners and something they can do right now, very moment. So I really appreciate that. And Jason, this conversation was incredible. I really appreciate the talk and the conversation. I think it's a lot different than what maybe the traditional paradigm or model of how things are viewed and looked at. And I think as much as there are amazing things out there externally, like we can't forget one of the most incredible resources which is our intuition of home and
Yeah.
who we are. So I really want to thank you for the time and talking today.
Thank you.